What's up, everybody? And welcome back to another video here breaking down this Karen Read trial as we continue to try to determine if there's a conflict of interest here, if there's bias, if there's prejudice, if there's something that these investigators did that they should not have done based on their relationship, what they knew in the area. And that was dug into today by the defense lawyers. The judge allowed quite a bit. We're going to go through what the judge allowed, what the defense lawyers got out of this evidence and these witnesses today to try and determine what's going on here and how, if anything, if there is any issue or conflicts, did that affect the investigation and the eventual outcome of that investigation, which turned into Karen Read's arrest and charges filed. All that and more on today's video. Thank you guys for joining me. Hit that like button before we get started. So we're jumping in today with, again, another little legal discussion that I think is always interesting. And you guys always have questions about this stuff. And the judge was angry yet again at how an exhibit came in. But as you can tell, the defense is doing some of this stuff on the fly to impeach these witnesses. They're getting things late at night. They're following the judge's orders, and the judge doesn't even know that stuff's coming through the system because it takes time sometimes. So it's not necessarily on the judge. But right where we're going to start today is the judge admonishing the defense for kind of wasting time, whether or not we agree with that, whether or not we think they were wasting time, if there was anything else they could have done. Let's take a listen to what the judge has to say.
May I see those, Madam Court Reporter, please?
She sent the jury out at this point and is going to deal with the lawyers.
All right. So I thought you were going to cut them. Apparently, you probably don't have scissors. Let's get these so that they're acceptable to go to the jury. I mean, this just came in with the whole report on it.
I'm sorry?
This just came into evidence with the whole report, and that's not what you agreed to at sidebar.
I mean, I guess we didn't have scissors, but what I was going to do, because it's folded, all I was going to show the jury was the part that got in.
But these are now in evidence. Okay, and that can't happen. So
she's right in the fact that you can't put full documents if only half the documents coming into evidence. That's like saying we're going to redact part of it and you don't redact part of it. So she is right about that. I get why that's frustrating. They didn't have scissors, but they also didn't want to waste the jury's time and have to wait, pause, go get scissors, cut them just before they're going to show a part of this document to the jury. Okay, so that's the first thing. First part of it, I agree with the judge, but let's keep listening.
fix them. Do we have scissors, Mr. Clerk? Thank you. So why don't you fix them, run them through a copy machine. All right, we'll take a 5-minute recess. And actually, this is probably a good time for me to say, and it's not just the defense, it's not just the prosecution.
She was about to say it's not the defense. I mean, it's not just the defense and it's not just the prosecution, but
we're taking an awful lot of these jurors' times. We're taking days and weeks. Let's not squander it by, repetitive evidence or taking time like this that we shouldn't need to take. Okay, let's move this case along. All right. I'll be out in 5 minutes.
I agree with her. We should try to move this case along. But where I disagree with her is that it definitely seemed like she was looking at the defense and saying, it's not just the defense, but don't waste time with this repetitive evidence. And I was like, wow, okay, yeah. I mean, if they're going to talk about the top of that face sheet again, maybe there is repetitive evidence. Au contraire. Because I had the benefit at, now hindsight is 2020, looking back at this and reacting to this video, what they're about to share is absolutely not repetitive. This is new. It may be similar discussion that we had at the end of the day yesterday, but there's new insight into what they're about to get to with this witness. But on the Commonwealth side, I agree there's a ton of repetition going on. We don't need to hear the background of every officer and first responder and how snowy it was. We've seen the video of how snowy it was. I would basically object to cumulative, and the best evidence is the video, Judge. The jury has literally seen the video of them driving up to the scene. We all know how snowy it was. But I digress. So, let's get into that discussion about the changes that were made in this report, who made them, and whether or not they're important. And you can see here's the first one is at the top, the second one is at the bottom, and there is a picture added to this updated report. And let's talk about what other changes were or were not made.
Other than the print date of the face sheet of your report, one appears to be in January, one appears to be in October. The major change is the photo that's included on.
By the way, on redirect, he said, you were told to ignore the print date, weren't you? He just said, other than the print date, let's talk about what's changed.
The face sheet, correct?
Yes. Can I explain why?
So that second photo with the piece of taillight that is included on the first page of your report, that photo is not from January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never took a photo of a piece of taillight on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
You never saw a piece of taillight at 34 Fairview on January 29th of 2022, correct?
Correct.
Well, that seems important that he didn't see that, which we already knew because he testified to it. But now it makes its way into his report with the same date on it. There's no date next to that picture to say this was taken on a different date. So if somebody was to look at the top of this, maybe the jury, what would they think? They might think that this was taken on that date. It may be a minor issue. And if this was the only issue, okay, if this was the only issue, I'd say, okay, that sucks. I get it. It's not perfect. Law enforcement does their best, but sometimes there's Scrivener's error. Sometimes, some clerk or secretary or another law enforcement person puts a picture on a page and it gets reprinted and it was a mistake. But this is starting to seem like more to me throughout the investigation. Not there yet, but they're definitely building.
Did you personally switch the photo on the face sheet of your police report?
No.
Do you know?
So then we've already confirmed, I think, if not, we're about to, that it's his name at the bottom. This is his report. So he's not even the one that put this picture in. And he doesn't know who put this picture in. That's problematic.
Who did?
So whoever updated the report, their supplemental, you add photos.
But in answer to my question, do you know the specific person from your department who altered the photo on the face sheet of your report?
I didn't take the supplemental report, so I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know who took the photo.
So he's like, yeah, sure. Whenever you do a supplemental report, you add pictures. It's like to the face sheet and you don't know who added it and you had nothing to do with it and it was your report. I'm not sure.
Oh.
But given that this is your report, you're the reporting officer, you are responsible for the content of that report, are you not?
For my report, yes, not other officers' supplementals to an investigation.
All right, but this is your report. This is the face sheet for the reporting officer, Sergeant Sean Good, is it not?
Yes, on the face sheet.
All right. Now, would you agree with me that someone reading this report and seeing that the date and time of the report is listed as January 29th of 2022 at 8:24 a.m., that's when you wrote it, correct?
That's when I logged in, yes.
Somebody reading that and seeing a photo of a piece of taillight might believe that that photo is from the same date that you're writing the report, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
Do you think it's misleading to include a photo on the face sheet of the report when the report is dated January 29th, 2022, and the photo is not from that date, it's from sometime later?
Objection.
Sustained.
Is there anything on what is now marked Exhibit 44 on that face sheet that indicates the date and time that that photo on Exhibit 44 was taken?
No.
Is there anything on Exhibit 44, that face sheet of your report, that indicates that it applies to some supplemental report that was later filed?
No.
I may have a moment.
Yes.
All right. So he makes his point there. And in redirect, we have to remember back to yesterday where there was a lot of talk about the Alberts and connection about Alberts, and more of that's coming today. And again, the Commonwealth focused on this conflict of interest, not just the defense. And that's right where redirect, which is the second crack at this witness, the Commonwealth gets. And they fire into a situation that I was kind of nervous for them. I was like, are you sure you want to get into this? I feel like this might be opening the door to even more information. And then later the defense argues about it, but let's listen to how the Commonwealth wants to deal with some of these conflicts and try to downplay the connections with the Alberts and the police protecting the Alberts.
Now, you were asked some questions about having been to that residence at 34 Fairview Road prior. And you indicated that you had been there years ago with Sergeant Lang. Is that correct?
Yes.
And what was that in regards to, sir?
It was a hit and run investigation.
And who, if anyone, so why were you at that residence at 34 Fairview Road?
So there was a call for a motor vehicle crash at the corner of Dedham and Washington Street, and the suspect vehicle had fled the scene. Officer Lank, was my partner that night. He followed the oil spill of the vehicle down Dedham Street, up Cedar Crest, all the way down to the intersection of Cedar Crest to Fairview, and the oil spill actually drove into 34 Fairview, where we found the vehicle.
So Lank was with him again. We're going to hear more from Lank later. Thank you, Kat, for gifting some memberships. And Fiona. So Lank was there with him, and this was so obvious that after the accident, the oil spill went all the way from the accident to the person's house, the Albert's house. What's interesting about this, I've actually had a case similar to this on a hit and run. It was a DUI death case that I was on the other side of, and the oil followed the person all the way to their apartment complex. They also hit the gate and dragged part of the gate to their apartment. So this stuff happens where it's like a direct line to them, and that's great evidence. And they had that against Albert.
And who, if anyone, did you, through your investigation, who, if anyone, did you associate with operating that?
That'd be Tim Albert.
And was Mr. Timothy Albert, was he charged in reference to that incident?
Yes, he was.
And do you know approximately when that was?
It was in 2009. I don't know the exact date, but I know the year.
Now, as far as Mr. Through your investigation, who, if anyone, did you associate with operating that?
That'd be Tim Albert.
And was Mr. Timothy Albert, was he charged in reference to that incident?
Yes, he was.
Okay, so sorry, I just want to make sure I didn't miss that part. So we played it twice. So they made sure that they got out, and I think it was smart of the Commonwealth to get it in the beginning, because then they went into some other stuff that was a little less important about the face sheet and try to downplay the importance of the face sheet, which is fine, whatever. But after the defense tries to up the importance of the face sheet and the entire report has to be accurate, no mistakes, and because this has to be a really important part of your job. And the Commonwealth tries to downplay it, of course, especially if there's a mistake. But they put in front of this jury that Tim Albert hit a car, drove back, the oil spill connected to his house, and he was charged. You want to know why he was charged? Because the cops don't protect the Alberts. The cops do what's right. The cops don't cover up anything. The cops don't make things go away. That's basically what the prosecution is trying to get out with this piece of evidence. Thank you, Nina, for gifting some memberships. So because they brought this up, the defense asks for a brief recross. And I am not surprised at where they go. So let's take a listen.
Charged as a result of the investigation that you did years ago.
Nothing further on.
Okay,
If I might,
very briefly.
you had just talked about how Tim Albert was charged as a result of the investigation that you did years ago, correct?
Yes.
The evidence in that case, you would agree with me, was strong against Tim Albert for that crime, was it not?
For leaving the scene? Yes.
Sure. Sergeant Blank actually was able to follow the trail of fluid from the accident scene right to 34 Fairview, correct?
Yes.
And Tim Albert admitted that he got nervous and left the scene, correct?
Correct.
All right. Now,
The evidence was strong for the leaving of the scene. And that's exactly what the defense wants him to confirm. And he confirms it. The evidence was strong, right? That's why charges were filed. It all makes sense.
despite the fact that he was charged, are you aware that the case was just flat out dismissed upon restitution?
Objection, move to strike, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
Nothing further.
The defense wanted to say, yeah, he was charged, but it was dismissed. It was dismissed outright. Objection sustained. Couple reasons here, okay? Couple things, reasons why this can happen. We don't know why. I can't remember if this is the one that they talked about, how he did diversion and got the charges dropped, and you can get your record sealed or expunged, blah, blah, blah. That's fine. Or if it was just outright dismissed, which is what it sounded like, it was just outright dismissed, which again, flies right in the face of what the state was trying to argue. I was shocked the judge sustained this objection. The Commonwealth opened this door wide open by saying he was charged. That's misleading to the jury. I literally typed that out in my notes. So the Commonwealth just is allowed to mislead the jury and act like, well, we charged Albert, but let's stop there. Let's not talk about anything else. I had a major problem with that. Now, luckily, the defense is right there fighting hard, much smarter than me and much more knowledgeable about this case than I can ever be. And so we're going to hear them make this exact argument later. Actually, I think we're going to do it right now. Yeah, we're going to do it right now. We're going to jump to that part now. Jackson, I believe, makes this argument. Outside the presence of the jury now, we are going to argue about what's going to come in with Officer Lank because, you know, we had that whole proffer yesterday and the judge is going to decide what you can talk about, what you can't talk about. The defense is going to push for more, of course. The prosecution is going to object to everything. So we're going to hear now this discussion and figure out what's going to come in.
It's important to the defendant's case. So tell me exactly, based on the voir dire yesterday, exactly what you hope to get into.
Thank you, Your Honor. With regard to the voir dire yesterday, my intention is to closely mirror my questioning of Sergeant Lank with my questioning of him on voir dire. In other words, the fact of the fight, the fact of Chris Albert's involvement in the fight, the fact of his getting involved in the fight. We called officers to assist him, the specifics of the allegations of the Localito brothers as to his conduct, what they alleged he did, the part that he took in the fight, their subsequent release from the scene, going back into the Canton Police Department to file or lodge a complaint. The fact that they were turned away for the complaint, there were subsequent police reports filed. And the
So I don't have those, right? You didn't send them to us.
we got those. We got those
All
last.
right, it's okay. It's too late for the police reports, but go ahead and finish what you've got.
Did you see Karen Reed's face? She's like, what? It's too late for the police report. So watch her face when she says she can't get into the police reports. And then this is when I was mentioning off the top, the judge didn't even know the defense got them and sent them in. Now they might not have gotten to the judge, but the defense did exactly what the judge asked for.
Police reports filed. And the
So I don't have those, right? You didn't send them to us.
we got those. We got those
All
last.
right, it's okay. It's too late for the police reports, but go ahead and finish what you've got.
Right. Just so the court knows, as the court requested, we provided those to the judicial assistant last night.
Who's the judicial assistant?
Like, Mr.
Is this Lololitos?
Go ahead from the after.
It's like him, the guy sitting right there. It sounds like he doesn't know his name. It's always a good thing, a tip for trial lawyers. And again, he's tried a lot more cases than we. He's crushing it. This is not a slight to him at all. Just what they tell us when we first start learning. And I have implemented it, and I think it's great to go walk around the courtroom, learn everybody's name, so that if something like this pops up, you know this person's name, you're respectful of this person. Not to say he's not. I'm just saying that's always a tip for good trial lawyering.
To the police report.
So basically, Your Honor, and I don't have any interest in introducing the police reports. I just need the timing. In other words, there was a fight, the complaint, the police reports were filed after the complaint, and then they were charged after the police reports. And then the subsequent resolution of the matter. The fact
So what do you mean by subsequent revolution? Of the
they were adjudicated not guilty, and ultimately the subsequent witness intimidation request by Sergeant Lank was thrown out by the DA. With regard to what was brought up by Mr. Lally yesterday, I intend to include and elicit in my questioning of Sergeant Lank the issue concerning Tim Albert and the resolution of that issue.
Well, Mr. Yannetti just did that.
Well, he didn't because the court struck it.
Yeah.
The
It should not have been.
She's like, Mr. Yannetti, he wants to get into the fact that the charges were dismissed against Tim Albert because the Commonwealth brought it up. And she's like, well, Mr. Yannetti, the other lawyer, just got into that. He's like, well, no, Judge, actually he didn't, because when he objected to it, you struck it. You sustained the objection and struck it. So it's not in evidence. So you can't say it's in evidence, the jury can consider it, when you struck it and told the jury they can't consider it. Now, you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, but if it shouldn't have gone back in the tube, you shouldn't try to squish it in there, right? You can't do that. That's misleading to the jury. And he's going to make the exact argument here that, we were just talking about earlier that immediately popped in my head. I was like, how can you leave that misrepresentation open in the air? Now, it does happen. Some frustrating rules of evidence allow lawyers to do this inappropriately sometimes. But you got to be there and you got to fight. That's why you got to listen to you got to do 10 things at once when you're trying a case.
the resolution of that issue.
Well, Mr. Yannetti just did that.
Well, he didn't because the court struck it.
Yeah. It should not have been done.
Well, Your Honor,
Go ahead.
respectfully, the Commonwealth left the jurors with a misimpression intentionally.
So
The last question was, and he was charged. That's true. He was charged. And then those charges were dismissed subsequent thereto.
right, but this was specific. We should have, and it wasn't objected to, right? So
Okay. So it wasn't objected to. Okay. And what she means when she says it wasn't objected to, she meant the defense did not object to the Commonwealth asking that question, was he charged? Okay. So she's basically putting the onus on the defense because you didn't object to them finding out that information. It's too specific. I'm not going to allow it to get into the specifics. Therefore, you're not going to be able to respond to that because you didn't object. That to me is a horrible decision because it's not on the defense to make sure the Commonwealth doesn't open any door or doesn't do anything wrong. Or if some information comes out, the defense has to react and has to make it right in front of the jury. So the onus is not on the defense. The onus is first on the Commonwealth. And if the judge wants to say, no, stop, strike that, that's not admissible, I'm not going to let you open that door and then let the defense get into it, whatever it may be. So her options here are either to give a curative instruction which would not really be helpful for the defense, but to tell the jury, disregard and don't consider that Tim Albert was charged. Or to let the defense get into the fact that it was thrown out. But instead, she puts the onus on the defense because they did not object when they asked about Tim Albert being charged. Now they can't correct this misinformation in front of the jury.
Mr. Lally's question wasn't objected to. All right. So is that the end of what you intend to get into?
Yes.
All right. Mr. Lally, do you want to, you're objecting to all of this?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay. Do you want to be heard?
She's like, yeah, I already know. You're objecting to all of it. You don't need to argue about it. I know what you'd argue. Which, I mean, that happens. That happens all the time. It's not abnormal.
Specifically on anything?
No, Your Honor.
All right. So what I'm going to allow you to get in is the relationship of Sergeant Lank with the Alberts. But keep in mind, Mr. Jackson, the Alberts are not all one entity. So you must do it individually. And simply because the witness had a relationship with Chris Albert doesn't mean that it has any bearing on favoritism or bias to Brian Albert or to Tim Albert. So you have to do them individually. I'll give you some leeway on the incident itself, but keep in mind the particulars of the fight isn't really what matters here. It's the fact of the fight and the intervening of Sergeant Lank on behalf of Chris Albert as it's relevant to bias or favoritism. So if there are objections that you get beyond, you may be stopped. You can get when and where it happened, that it happened outside a bar where the witness had been drinking. He did not acknowledge your drinking buddy's comment, so you're not to specifically say that, where you just said you're going to outline what you did yesterday, and that this occurred in Canton, the role, if any, he had in handcuffing or having the Lapalitos put in custody, and the fact that Mark Lapalito went to the Canton Police Department to file a report. What you cannot get into is the mobile gas station incident, because I didn't hear anything yesterday that the conduct of Sergeant Lank had anything to do with the Alberts. I'm not convinced that it wasn't merely self-interest on his part. So
I thought she let pretty much most of it in from yesterday. But the one big factor in story she's not going to let in is what happened at the mobile gas station, where Lank goes up to them or vice versa. They exchange words. Maybe he said something, one of them said something mean to the other. And what does Lank do but files witness intimidation charges that were later thrown out? And that's not coming in. And why that's a big deal is to me, just to a lawyer, let's say. And me and my dad were golfing the other day and I told him about this and he was like, what? He's like, how corrupt does that seem? And he told me, I won't tell you some of the stuff he told me. It might not go over so well. But what I'll say is that not coming in, that is potentially the most scummy part of the story, is that you want to show as a cop, you can do whatever you want. You are the law. You can have serious charges filed against somebody just by your word with nobody else being there to corroborate it. So that not coming in, I do think it's a big deal, because I think the jury would look at this guy if they understood what that story was like and be like, whoa, brother, we cannot trust you. We cannot trust you. So that's not coming in, but it seems like most everything else is going to come in, and we're going to get to hear, that story explained later when he takes the stand.
that's out. That was 22 years ago. Nothing. So you're not getting into the federal investigation.
She said that's out 22 years ago. It's like, but all the other stuff that was 22 years ago is coming in.
Was sued. I'm not letting you get into the not guilty because it's speculative. Who knows why he was found not guilty, why they were found not guilty. You cannot get into that. There are all kinds of reasons people can be found not guilty.
There are also all kinds of reasons people can be charged, but they were able to get into that. The fact is, you're not saying they were not guilty because there was no merit. You're just saying it was not guilty so they don't think a jury went and convicted them. That's the problem.
Whether I allow more depends on the testimony, the direct and the cross. So you are to go no further than that without leave of court. So the Commonwealth can then get into the animosity between the witness, Sergeant Lank, and Brian Albert because of the arrest of Tim Albert. But if Mr. Lally, if you open the door to something further, I need to be seen at sidebar before anybody can come get into that. So Mr. Jackson, you did this in 10 minutes yesterday. I don't expect you to take 2 hours to do this, okay? And just as an aside again, let's not waste the jury's time with repetitive testimony.
I don't intend to, Your Honor. I think I understand the court's, the parameters. The one thing I didn't hear the court say, but I think it was implied, but I want to make sure I'm clear. I can.
He just confirms that he can get into that, the police report was filed after they tried to come and make a formal complaint against the officers, and the answer was yes. All right, so then we get into Lank's actual testimony. He talks about how he spoke to McCabe outside the house for 8 to 9 minutes. He talks about when he talked to McCabe inside the house. He was able to go inside and outside the house multiple times But one of the important parts I want to focus on was the Commonwealth's questioning and how they dealt with what they knew was coming at this point. Obviously, they know there's going to be questions about the Alberts, about the connections, about the conflicts. So they try to normalize it a little bit. They try to eat the bruises, as we say. They try to take the punch away. They try to pull an Eminem in 8 Mile, right? I know everything you have to say against me. That's what they're going to try to do here with this officer before the defense comes and hammers him with all of this bias.
From a layout perspective.
There was a staircase right in front of us, and to the right, it entered into like what appeared to be like a dining area.
And who, if anyone, did you speak with inside the home that morning?
Brian Albert and Nicole Albert.
And what, if any, relationship to the home did you determine based on your conversation with them?
They were the homeowners.
Brian Albert, is that someone that you knew prior to January 29th, 2022?
Yes,
How did you know?
I knew him as the oldest of the Albert brothers.
And did you know some of the other Albert brothers?
Yes,
And let me ask you this, Sergeant. Where did you grow up?
Canton.
And how long have you lived in Canton?
We moved here. Excuse me. We moved to Canton when I was 5 years old.
So essentially, since you were 5 years old, you live in the town, correct?
Yes.
You work in the town, correct?
Yes.
You have children?
I do.
Any of them play sports?
They do.
Objection.
I'm sustained.
Move to strike.
Start that.
What if any other sort of, other than living and working in the town, what if anything else is it that you do around the town?
I coach youth sports.
And how long have you done that for?
I would say at least 9 or 10 years.
And how would you describe your relationship with Brian Albert prior to that January 29th, 2020?
Civil.
Do you friends? Do you socialize?
No.
Now, in addition to Brian Albert and Nicole Albert, who, if anyone else, where did you speak to them within the home?
Just inside the door by the staircase.
And how would you describe their demeanor when you were speaking to them?
They appeared, especially Mr. Albert, appeared disheveled, looked like he had just woken up.
So first, they normalized it a little bit. You grew up here, 5 years old. You coach youth sports. Everybody knows everybody. Small town, no big deal. You know the Alberts, right? So it's no surprise that they're friendly, civil, whatever he uses. They're not best friends. So they already know, and they're trying to take some of the sting away from the punch that they know are coming. Ashley, I will say this is one thing my dad said as well. HP said, question, if a juror feels like the judge is showing bias that they feel may influence themselves or others, can they raise that with the court? Yeah, they can. Very unusual for a juror to do something like that. Sonia, it shows that this officer does shady stuff, which does pertain to this case. I agree. I mean, especially when you're talking about, potential cover up, dirty cops, whatever. I mean, that's pretty tough. That's pretty tough. Debs, this is so normal for judges. It's not even funny. I mean, judges, halftime, they don't know how to use the system. The other halftime, there's something wrong with the system where it doesn't actually get to them because somebody has to push it to them. I don't know the answer to this, but it's not really something I would harp on this judge for versus any other judge in the world. HP, why should the defense object if the prosecution opened the door on something they wanted to get into? So I think it's a combination, right? You can't be strategic and set stuff up to push people to open doors so you can go through them. But if they just missed the objection, it came out, it's out. So now we got to deal with it. And I don't think they did anything intentionally in this case. I think that evidence came out and they're trying to deal with it and they should be able to deal with it. Mary Claire said, can we all just agree that giraffe shirt is fabulous? I know exactly which one you're talking about because I keep noticing it when it comes on the screen. All right, let's listen to a little bit more of how he describes, Albert was disheveled like he just woke up. So he's testifying. It's pure speculation that he just woke up. Or hearsay if he told him he just woke up. But that's what he's saying because, again, he definitely wasn't up, fighting or cleaning anything up or having anything to do with this because he's so disheveled. That's, what it seems like he's testifying to, which very well may be true.
And about how long a conversation was it between Brian Albert and Nicole Albert that initial time?
I'd say 15, 20 minutes.
And beyond that, who, if anyone else, did you see within the home besides yourself, Sergeant Goods, and Mr. and Mrs. Albert?
Jennifer McCabe.
No one else at that time?
No.
Are you familiar with a gentleman named Brian Hayes?
I am.
And how are you familiar with him?
I met Brian when he was stationed at our police station. I don't know how many years ago it was, but he was assigned to our building years ago. That's how I met him.
And assigned in what capacity? What I mean by that, what did you do?
Brian is a ATF agent.
And did you see Mr. Higgins at any point in time during the time that you were at Fairview Road that morning?
Not on my initial response.
So sometime after, is that correct?
Yes.
When about was that?
That would have been shortly after 9 a.m.
And we'll get to that in a moment, but after your conversation with Brian Albert and Nicole Albert inside the house, what is it that you did then?
Could you repeat that, please?
After talking to the homeowners, what was your next step on scene that day? What did you do next?
After speaking with the family, came out. By that point, Lieutenant Gallagher was on scene and spoke with Lieutenant Gallagher as to what we were going to do next as far as the scene itself.
And he walks through what they did at the scene, reiterated what they found in the snow. How it wasn't all the pieces at that point. Again, before the light went back that the defense argued had been manipulated and broken even more by them. The other officer said, no, that didn't happen. We didn't break it anymore. Yet a bunch more pieces are found later after multiple officers searched the scene and first responders were at the scene. He was the one that took the evidence back chain of custody wise. So again, this guy is doing interviews at the scene with homeowners, people involved in the case. Potentially he's walking the scene. He's gathering evidence. He's the chain of custody, bringing the evidence back. He's sealing it. He can confirm it was all done right. It was done with his hands. So I'm finding it very hard to believe that, it was no big deal. The defense is overestimating Officer Lank's involvement in the case. That was one of the Commonwealth's argument, is that they were overstating or overestimating this guy's involvement in the case. But after listening to his testimony, they tried to make it short and sweet. They tried to make it as short as they could, but there's no getting around. He went on scene multiple times. He was able to go into the house just by asking 2, 3, 4 times. He was able to get statements by the homeowners. Why? Was it because he's friends with them? And if he is friends with them, why is he doing all of this? If there's a conflict of interest with this guy, if that's what the jury thinks and finds, there's a potential for them to just think the fruit of the poisonous tree, that everything this guy touched, there's a problem. There is possibility for that. They have the ability to judge his credibility. It's really interesting to hear all the stuff that he did. Jen McCabe called him again, 9 a.m. He goes back and talks to her. 5 days later is when more evidence was discovered, more pieces of the light. And then we get to cross. And I thought this was kind of cool and different, is where we get to hear the judge give an instruction before the defense even gets to cross-examine this witness to the jury to basically say, you're going to hear about some old stuff and, put it into context about how they can use the information they're about to use. And Christy asked, what makes a difference how long ago it was? So in the law, in order to bring up things that are ancillary to the case, right? It's not, she has a picture of her plotting to do this 20 years ago. That would come in. It's relevant. Obviously, it goes to motive. It goes to plan, whatever. But when it's something like this, the more remote it is, if it's older, the less likely it is to be relevant and be used. Doesn't mean always, because obviously it can become relevant like a case like this, but it's just less likely. All day vapor. We get this question at least once a video. Why no reason for the objection? How is the judge doing this? Basically, the judge is thinking of any reason she can think to sustain it. If she doesn't think any, it's overruled. I think that creates appellate issues. I dove into it a lot, I think, on the first video, so I don't want to go into it too much again, but very interesting. Maria said, could this have been handled before trial? This seems disjointed to me. So sometimes in lawyers, you don't know what's going to come out. They definitely didn't know about all the pictures they were going to have. They planned on proving and talking about these connections, but the judge a lot of times will say, I'm not going to make a decision until we get the witness on the stand. I hear what the witness says, which we heard yesterday. Then the judge makes a decision. So sometimes you can't get it all handled before trial, but a lot of times you can. Caitlin, do we think the average juror understands how sloppy this investigation appears to have been, or do they typically trust law enforcement judgment? Plastic cups, yeah. So different parts of the country, I'll just tell you, sometimes people do not trust local law enforcement. I don't know if Boston PD is that way, or Canton PD or whatever it may be, but there are certain parts of the country where they just don't trust cops. Other parts they do, generally, and then some it's in the middle and they'll kind of see. It depends on each individual person's experience with investigations, law enforcement, whatever it may be, with how horrible this may be sounding. If it's their first experience, maybe it seems normal. The cops are definitely making it seem normal, even though some of them are testifying there's anything but standard for this investigation. So I don't know. I think this is really a person-by-person basis. I would say most of the chat and people I've heard talking about this case, it's hard for me to tell because I think they had a lot of information going into it, which, I like to hear people that they haven't seen anything and they're like, wow, this is sloppy. If it's hitting the average lay person as sloppy, then I think it's going to hit the average juror as well. Okay, so let's hear the judge kind of explain to the jury how they should think about this evidence that's about to be presented to them.
All right, jurors, so you're about to hear evidence of an event that happened in 2002. This evidence can be considered by you insofar as it demonstrates or relates to the credibility of this witness and the thoroughness of the investigation into this case for which the defendant is currently on trial before you folks. You may use this evidence to the extent that you find it credible in deciding whether there was any bias or favoritism on the part of the police in their investigation in this case.
I think that's a great instruction for the defense. How thorough was their investigation? Was there favoritism? Was there bias in this case and investigation? Highlight, here we go. Jurors, pay attention. Here comes evidence that you are going to listen to and be able to use in this manner. So that's the windup for the evidence. We're going to listen to, 5 or 10, maybe 10 minutes of it now.
Mr. Jackson, yes.
Lieutenant Lank, I want to start by asking you about your relationship with certain members of the Albert family. Do you know any other members of the Albert family other than Brian Albert?
Yes.
Can you describe who those are?
Kevin Albert, who is a detective on our department, Chris Albert, and I know Tim Albert.
Are those three individuals brothers?
Yes.
Who is the eldest brother?
Brian.
How long have you known, I want to start first with Tim Albert. How long have you known Tim Albert?
I knew Tim Albert when he was a kid because he was friends with a younger brother of a friend of mine.
Starting at what age?
12.
So you've known,
He was 12. I was probably 16 or so.
okay. So the better part of your life, you've known Tim Albert.
Since about 16, I would say.
And what about Chris Albert?
Chris Albert, I've known since junior high,
Which would be about what age?
13, 14,
You grew up
12,
with Chris
12, 13. I was friendly with Chris from junior high through high school and into our 20s.
and friendly with Tim.
I wouldn't say I was friendly to say hello to Tim. I didn't associate with him. He was younger. He was Chris's younger brother.
But you also knew Chris's older brother, Brian.
Yes.
Back in those days.
I knew who he was.
So you've known the three of them for basically your entire life.
No, I had met them. I had met Brian. I didn't know him other than just being Chris's older brother when we were younger kids.
Certainly with regard to Chris, you would consider him a close friend.
Consider who a close friend.
Chris. I'm
Yes.
using first names only because they're all
Sure. Chris and I were pretty good friends when we were younger. Yes.
I want to draw your attention to an incident in August of 2002. Do you remember an incident in 2002 occurring with that involved Chris Albert?
Yes.
Well, he remembers.
In 2002, in August of 2002 specifically, you were off duty, correct?
Yes.
You had been drinking alcohol, correct?
Yes.
You were approached by Chris Albert out in the parking lot, is that right?
That's correct.
And Chris Albert told you some information about being in a fight, that he had been in a fight or an altercation of some sort, correct?
He told me he had been in an altercation earlier in the night and some threats had been made to him and his family.
And you got out of your car and discussed this with Mr. Albert, correct?
No.
You just talked to him while you were seated in your car?
Yes.
Okay, at some point, did some other individuals approach that same area?
Yes.
Was there a fight that you believe was about to ensue?
Yes.
Did you get out of your car at that point?
I did.
Did you come to Chris's aid by, quote unquote, activating yourself as an officer?
I got out of my car and I approached the group and I pleaded with them to not fight tonight. I said, there's not going to be a fight tonight. There's 6 of you guys. He's here with his girlfriend. There's not going to be a fight tonight.
Did you come to Chris Albert's aid as best you could as a longtime friend of his?
I came to the aid of a citizen who was in fear and of need.
That citizen happened to be Chris Albert, whom you had known since you were 12 years old.
Correct.
Again, he tries to go with I came to the aid of a citizen in need. I think if I was the defense lawyer, I don't think he asks this, but he asked it yesterday when it was not in front of the jury. You did this because it was Chris Albert, right? You wouldn't just do this for anybody. He said, oh, absolutely, I would. If you remember that discussion, I don't think he asked it, but that's as close as we got to. I came to help a citizen in need. I would have liked for him to say, I would have done this for anybody that asked me. And then you could argue that in closing. It's like, yeah, right. You would have done that for anybody.
Ultimately, a fight did break out, did it not?
Yes.
And you engaged in that fight.
Yes.
And again, you had been drinking alcohol at that point, correct?
Correct.
And you were off duty in August of 2002 during this fight.
Yes.
Just like you were off duty in 2022 when you were called by Sergeant Good to activate and come to the crime scene at 34 Fairview.
When Sergeant Good contacted me, I was not working. I was due to work at 7:45 that morning. When Sergeant Good contacted me and told me what was going on, then I activated myself and came to work because I was the detective sergeant.
So really good job by the defense that he didn't do yesterday, as well as connecting those dots, right? You weren't on duty back then, and you weren't on duty in 2022 either. But you activate and come to the aid of the Albert. So I thought that was a good connection that I don't remember happening in the proffer. Andrea, what's up? Thank you so much for gifting 5 memberships. That's awesome.
And that's similar sort of activation, using that word in air quotes, it's similar sort of activation that you employed back in 2002 to assist Chris Albert.
No.
You did, in fact, call for someone to call the police and get some Canton officers over there, correct?
Excuse me. So in 2002?
In 2002.
Yes.
Okay. And I failed to ask you this, but in 2002, you were, in fact, a Canton police officer.
Yes.
At the time. After the other officers arrived, did you order the other officers to handcuff or somehow restrain one of the two brothers that were involved in this fight, Chris?
No.
Ultimately, did you see whether or not those officers handcuffed or otherwise restrained one of the brothers that was involved in this fight?
Yes.
And did you then engage physically in a fight with the other brother who was not restrained?
No. The struggle had already occurred.
All right. So let me make sure I get the timing right. You did, in fact, engage in a physical fight with one of the brothers, correct?
Upon being struck, yes.
I'm sorry, say that again.
Upon being struck, yes.
And then you struck him back.
Yes.
You ended up on the ground.
Yes, we were wrestling, yes.
And ultimately, the other officers had to pull you off that man, correct?
No.
You ultimately, the fight was broken up between you and the other brother. Is that right?
That's correct.
All right. And that fight was broken up by the officers who were on scene.
Yes.
After this physical altercation with the brother who was not ultimately restrained, both of the brothers and everybody else was just told by the officers, just go away. Get out of here, go home, correct?
No, I believe one of the brothers left the scene, fled the scene, and the brother that was restrained was ultimately uncuffed and left free to go.
And nobody was arrested that night.
Correct.
Nobody chased down the brother that left the scene, correct?
That's correct.
And nobody arrested the brother that had been.
Nobody was arrested that night. No police report filed against these two guys that apparently started a fight with some cops. Nothing happened to them until they wanted to file a claim against the cops.
Correct.
And no police reports were written by you or any of the other officers about this incident on that night.
I don't recall when the other officers wrote theirs. I did not write mine on that night.
The next day, you became aware that one or both of the brothers had arrived at Canton Police Department to file a formal complaint for having been physically attacked by you and some of the other officers involved, correct?
I don't recall when I was made aware that they had come down to the police station.
You are aware that there was a complaint sought against you for the physical attack that was alleged to have occurred, correct?
It was brought to my attention that they had come down to the police station.
And you also are aware that only after that complaint had been sought, the police reports were then dated and filed against the two brothers, correct?
So I had spoken to the sergeant on duty the night of the
Yes or no
incident.
question. I'm just looking at this.
It's not a yes or no question.
So he was just asking you about dates. So can you answer the question? Ask the question
Could you
about the
repeat?
dates again, please.
I'm seeking the chronology of events. A fight occurs, a complaint against you occurs, and then police reports are filed against the two people that are complaining against you. Is that the chronology?
Yes.
That's not a good chronology for you because it looks like you retaliated. And again, used your influence and position as a law enforcement officer. That's what the defense is trying to get in front of this jury.
And you're also aware that although he had been in a physical fight that night, no charges were ever brought against Chris Albert, correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
Do you know that?
I don't know. I don't even know where the fight occurred.
Officer Lang, what we just talked about, is that an example of you using your position as a police officer to come to the aid of one of the members of the Albert family?
It was me coming to the aid of a citizen who was terrified and scared for him and his family on that night.
Who happened to
Who
be
happened?
named what?
Excuse me. Who happened to be Chris Albert.
You mentioned Kevin Albert. Who's he?
Kevin Albert is a detective with the Canton Police.
Is he a coworker?
Yes.
How long have you known him?
Probably since 14, 15 years old.
And you also consider him to be a friend as well as a coworker?
I do.
And a colleague?
Yes.
And you're also well aware. I mean, you've said it already.
You get kind of the picture of the connections that he's putting together there. I think it came off a little better yesterday. That's normal. He's now more prepared for the questions. The judge didn't let him get into the fact that he was sued in federal court and what those people said about the biting and all of that, and the fact that he paid a settlement to settle the case. I didn't think a lot of that was going to come in. Maybe the fact that he was sued could come in. That's pretty public. I don't understand what the problem is with that, but that it settled, I get why that didn't come in. So not really surprised, although I do think it packed a little more punch, no pun intended, yesterday than what we heard today. So we have to remember, because now we've seen something the jury has not seen. So we can't bring that into the equation when we're thinking about what do we think the jury's going to do? Did they come up with the right verdict? Things like that. So we have to remember that as we continue to watch this case, because we got to kind of keep separate what is happening in trial and what's happening outside of trial. He knew it was the Albert's house before he showed up. So again, should he ever accuse himself at that point? I think at least some people will think the answer to that is yes. No dash cam on his vehicle. Nobody recording any of these interviews that he's taking. They try to show the video and confirm it's Jennifer McCabe going in and out of the house, but they weren't able to do it. And then here is very interesting because it flies in the face of what the previous officer said, who's like, Absolutely not did I go in the house. Absolutely not did I ask the people that lived in the house what happened. No, I would never do that. No probable cause. You know that and I know that. Why would I ever do that? Well, it's like Officer Lang thought it was pretty important, and he explains that here.
Said to her that at some point we're going to need to speak to Brian and Nicole
Why did you think it was important to speak to Brian and Nicole?
because it's their property.
And somebody was laying in the snow, unconscious and unresponsive, correct?
Correct.
And obviously that could potentially, at least, implicate people inside the house.
Based on my conversation with Ms. McCabe, she had stated that the intention was for Mr. McCabe, for Mr. O'Keefe to join them at that house. So I wanted to get statements from everybody who was there.
So there's a connection inside the house. That's another step towards probable cause. I don't remember us hearing that until now, that they knew John O'Keefe was supposed to end up inside that house. That adds another connection inside that house. People thought he was going to end up there. So that other cop that acts like, no way, no probable cause, like at least arguable probable cause. There's a connection with inside the house. And even he said he thought it was really important to talk to them.
That what happened, correct?
Correct.
I mean, that's sort of the obvious initial point of an investigation. Find out who the witnesses are and interview all of them, correct?
Correct.
And you began by talking to Ms. McCabe.
Yes.
Knowing that she was a potential witness at least, correct?
She identified herself as a friend of Mr. O'Keefe.
Who had been with Mr. O'Keefe just hours before.
Yes.
He ended up laying in the snow fighting for his life, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And you also knew that there were other witnesses.
And at least some of these people were with him earlier in the night. Plenty of connections to at least, I'm not saying they did anything, okay? We're not there yet. I'm not saying they did anything. I'm saying it's enough to at least investigate further, which the other cop acted like, no way, why would I do that? This cop obviously did. Was he the right cop to do that? That's the big question with the conflict of interest. Was he the right cop to do this stuff that we all agree at this point was important, including him?
Potentially inside the house, because she just told you that, right?
I knew that that was ultimately where he was supposed to end up.
So if there were other witnesses in the house, if there were other individuals in the house, they also were potential witnesses.
Potentially.
And Ms. McCabe indicated, I'm going to go in the house, correct?
I had told her that she's going to have to wake her sister up because we're going to need to speak with them.
You didn't think that it was more important to separate the witnesses and not let her talk to other witnesses?
No.
You thought that it was appropriate to let all the witnesses get together and just discuss the facts before you have an opportunity to interview them separately?
Objection.
It is to the form.
So basically he gets into that a little bit more. It's like you let them all talk to each other and get together before you even talk to them. Like you didn't even do that part right. Okay. But then potentially the biggest slip up of the entire day, of the entire Commonwealth case so far, is right here. When I heard this, I was like, oh boy. I would write this down if I was the defense team, and the jury would be hearing this from me again with his picture up on the screen saying he said this. None of our witnesses, none of the people, not from our questions. He said this out of the blue, uninitiated or uncoerced. We didn't push him in that direction. He said this.
For Fairview, we have a Boston police officer who was just found.
I stated that I was already at 34 Fairview.
You indicated that he does have some trauma to his head area, correct?
That's correct.
And you said, quote, I'm not sure if he's been in a fight or whatever. Our medics don't believe he's going to make it.
Correct.
End quote. Sergeant Lang,
Quote, Lanks, quote, I don't know if he's got trauma to the head. I don't know if he's been in a fight or something. Our medics don't think he's going to make it. I'm going to back it up so we can hear that quote. Again, this is Lanks, quote, what he said about John O'Keefe.
Review.
You indicated that he does have some trauma to his head area, correct?
That's correct.
And you said, quote, I'm not sure if he's been in a fight or whatever. Our medics don't believe he's going to make it.
Correct.
End quote.
I'm not sure if he's been in a fight or whatever. Why would he say that? Nobody has said Karen Reed said anything about a fight so far. Did I hit him? Is he dead? I hit him. I must have hit him. Lots of different quotes potentially attributable to Karen Reed. None of them that he got into a fight. Maybe they got in a fight earlier in that night. Maybe she made a statement like that, but not a fist fight or something that would cause this kind of damage. So where is he getting this information? And why is it coming from a Commonwealth witness?
Sergeant Lang, you never saw John O'Keefe's body, correct?
Correct.
So somebody disclosed to you that it appeared that he had been in a, quote, fight or whatever, at least at that point. That was your thought.
No.
And what made you say, well,
So he says, no. Nobody disclosed to me that he had been in a fight or whatever. So you just made that up? He's about to get into how it could have been one of a million things. Could have been hit by a car. Could have been a fight. He could have fallen off the roof. Somebody could have thrown him out of a moving car. A million things could have happened, I guess, to where you hit your face and you get this damage. So why'd you pick fight? Which is exactly what the defense's theory has happened in this case, because it's consistent with the injuries. Oof. This was a big misstep.
didn't say to dispatch, the victim appears to have been shot, correct?
Correct.
You didn't say it appeared he'd been stabbed?
No.
He had been strangled?
No.
You didn't say it appeared he'd been hit by a car?
Correct.
You said it appered that he'd been in a fight or whatever, correct?
I stated that he had some trauma to his head, and I said, I don't know if he has been in a fight. And then I believe I described it as I don't remember my exact terminology, but it was a crazy scene.
Chaotic scene?
Possibly. I don't recall my exact words, something to that effect.
But you do recall your exact words to dispatch being, I don't know if he's been in a fight or whatever.
Correct.
Okay. I want to talk about inside the house for just a few minutes, if I could. You've talked extensively about the crime scene outside.
Okay. Then they start talking about inside the house. Now he didn't map out where everything was. He wasn't super thorough in dealing with all of that. But after a sidebar, they do get into a little bit more about probable cause to search the house. So let's hear them talk about this.
Matt?
Sure.
Lieutenant Lang, given what you believed at the time and the possibility that there was a fight or whatever, did you logically think in your mind, your state of mind was it possibly could have started in the house?
If it had been of confrontation, it could have started anywhere.
Right? The house is part of anywhere, right?
Correct.
So in other words, the house is not excluded in your mind at that point as a starting point for the investigation. Is that right?
Well, the starting point would have been where Mr. O'Keefe had been discovered. And then based on speaking with the witnesses, there was no indication that he had ever made it into the house.
Well, you didn't know that until you followed up on your investigation, correct?
I learned that by speaking to Ms. McCabe.
So you just took Ms. McCabe's word for it.
At that point in time, that was the only person I had spoken to. And she gave me a timeline of events from that night where Mr. O'Keefe was supposed to come back to the house, but never made it.
Have you ever been, in your course of investigating cases, have you ever been lied to by a witness?
Objection, Your Honor.
Can you answer that? Have you ever been lied to by a witness?
Yes.
So it's not necessarily the best investigative technique to just take a witness's word for something, correct?
Objection.
That's sustained.
You need to actually.
And that's the point is we're connecting all these dots as the defense that when we were trying to prove a conflict of interest as a defense team here, and what do we have to do? And you're brainstorming that and you say, okay, we prove he's done it in the past for these specific people, the Alberts. He's doing it again. He's taking their word for it. He's protecting them. They're creating evidence. They're placing things there. They're setting it all up to try and make sure that nothing blows back on the Alberts. And whoever else is caught in the crosshairs like Karen Reed, so what? That's what the defense is trying to prove here. And that's why they're saying like witnesses lie, right? But you just take certain witnesses' word at face value as truth.
Investigate the circumstances for yourself and to your own satisfaction. Is that a fair statement?
Sure.
One of those investigative techniques would be to walk into the house and figure out who's who there, correct?
Can you rephrase the question?
Sure. One of those investigative techniques to satisfy yourself that you're actually getting to the truth of the matter would be to walk into the house and figure out who's in the house first.
I will agree that I needed to speak to the people in the home. I can't just walk in their house. I have to announce myself and they don't have to let me in.
He agrees that he should speak to people in the house. He can't just walk in. He has to announce himself. It's like, didn't you just testify that you did that 2, 3, 4 times? There was no issue with you going in the house. They invited you in the house, open arms. Maybe that's the problem, is they wouldn't have invited a cop that, wasn't so close to them.
I understand. I'm not trying to parse those words. I just mean entering the home and interviewing witnesses. That would be a normal part of your investigation initially, correct?
Yes.
And you also knew that the most obvious place to look for witnesses that may have information about a fallen man in the snow would be 30 feet away in the home, correct?
Correct.
So once you're inside the residence, you walked in the front door, correct?
Yes.
You indicated that there's a stair that serves as the second floor. Is that right?
Straight ahead, yes.
Right. Just before the staircase, there's a door to your left, right?
I don't recall.
You remember that there's a door that when you open it, it goes directly downstairs to the basement.
Somebody just burp.
I don't recall.
You indicated on direct examination that you didn't notice anything. I'm paraphrasing, so forgive me. You didn't notice anything out of place in the home.
No.
But you didn't go downstairs to the basement and look, did you?
No.
Didn't look for broken furniture down there.
I didn't enter the basement at all.
You didn't look for torn clothing down there.
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
How about anywhere in the house? Did you look for broken furniture or torn clothing or blood evidence or DNA evidence?
At that point in time, I never made it past the front foyer area.
So the answer to my question is no, you did not.
I never made it past the front foyer area.
So if I were to ask you one more time, I know you never made it past the foyer. Did you ever investigate the foyer area or any other part of the house for evidence of a fight?
The only area I was able to observe at that point, everything appeared to be in order.
But you didn't search the rest of the house for a fight. Lieutenant, that's all I'm asking.
No, I wouldn't have had probable cause to do so.
So he literally says, and this is what happens when you're trying to, outsmart a lawyer, right? We're not talking about medicine here. We're talking about legal stuff. And he says that a million times, like, you didn't investigate or search the rest of the house for scenes, views of a fight, or that there was any evidence that there was a fight there, right? And he quibbles around a bunch of ways. And he's like, the only part of the house I saw, everything looked in order. So what does that tell you? Well, it infers that you were able to look at and investigate part of the house, even without probable cause. Because if they invite you in their house, and it's in plain view, that's technically allowed for you to look at and make notes as to what you see. If I say, hey, I'm a cop, can I come in and talk? And you say yes, and I walk in and you got a bunch of guns and drugs over there, I can say, ho, 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 bring other cops in, let's arrest these people. I can see it in plain view. They invited me in their house. So he is admitting that he searched part of the house without probable cause, but is saying, oh, no way did I look at anything else. I would have needed probable cause to do that. No, you don't need probable cause to do that if they consent and let you do it. I'm going to back it up so we can hear that part again.
I never made it past the front foyer area.
So if I were to ask you one more time, I know you never made it past the foyer. Did you ever investigate the foyer area or any other part of the house for evidence of a fight?
The only area I was able to observe at that point, everything appeared to be in order.
But you didn't search the rest of the
He was able to observe a bunch of areas that appeared to be in order.
house for a fight. Lieutenant, that's all I'm asking.
No, I wouldn't have had probable cause to do so.
And did you seek guidance from a court as to whether or not you might have probable cause?
Do you mean a search warrant?
That's what I mean.
I wouldn't fill out an affidavit for a search warrant because it wouldn't have probable cause.
In your mind, there was no PC to search that house, right?
Objection.
Let's move on from this.
So he didn't think there was probable cause, wasn't worth doing, basically, even though he knew it was important to search that house. Catherine said, Peter, when the jurors came in, do you know if they asked if the potential jurors knew these policemen? I would guess they did based on what's going on in this case. Lisa, have you already made up your mind on this case, Peter? Not even close. It seems like a horrible investigation. Definitely seems like some of these cops should not have been involved, but that doesn't mean that she's innocent. That doesn't mean they're not going to be able to prove that she's guilty. I am especially waiting for evidence of like an accident reconstructionist to tell me, can we prove where her tire marks are, where the brakes and dents and cracks in her car and her light line up and match up with the injuries to John O'Keefe? How long was he laying there? Do they have any experts that can prove that based on, how the blood dried and things like that? I want to see all of that. There's still a lot more to go that they can prove this beyond a reasonable doubt. It's a rough start for the Commonwealth, I will say. Nina, Peter, your thoughts on law enforcement collecting blood evidence in plastic cups providing by a neighbor, not having probable evidence containers? Horrible. A huge chunk of the video yesterday, if you want to check out last night's video, was focused on this. Absolutely horrible. And that's what I'm saying is a rough start. It's a totally rough start to this investigation in this case for the Commonwealth. Okay. Next, he's going to ask, did you ever tell anyone? So we know you have this relationship. We know you're telling this jury about this relationship. Did you tell anybody else that night about your relationship with the Alberts? What do you think his answer is?
Did you believe at any point before you interviewed Mr. Albert that it was incumbent upon you to let your supervisors know that there may be a conflict of interest because of a personal relationship that you had with the family?
Objection.
Sustained.
Did you ever, in fact, not whether you believed, it was important, but did you ever, in fact, notify any of your superiors at Canton PD or any other law enforcement agency that you had a personal relationship with the Albert family or members of the Albert family?
I did not.
So the first question was objected to and sustained. The second one, he just flat out was like, no, I didn't tell anybody. I didn't tell any of my supervisors or anybody else about my relationship with them. The only reason I'm telling you in this jury is because the judge is forcing me to. I mean, let's be honest. That's what it feels like. That's what it feels like to me. Deb, I agree 100%. That's the brutal part. That's the reality when you let it set in and it's like, oh, this is so crazy. Wow. I can't believe this happened. Oh, I can't believe this misstep. What a great objection. Great job. But then it's like you step back and you're like, a real dude's life was lost, and this is what we have to show for it? Would he have done this to somebody else as a cop, as a first responder himself? I mean, it's brutal to think about.
You indicated that you believe you spoke to Mr. Albert and his wife, Nicole Albert, for maybe 15 to 20 minutes. Is that what you said?
Roughly.
Did you record that conversation?
I did not.
You have your cell phone with you, correct?
Yes.
You know that has recording capability?
Yes.
Was anybody else with Nicole? When I say with, I mean in earshot of Nicole and Brian Albert when you interviewed either one of them or both of them?
Jennifer McCabe.
So you interviewed them together?
Yes.
Did you then interview Jennifer McCabe?
I had spoken to Jennifer McCabe outside. To the best of my memory, I believe once we were inside, I was able to get some more information from her based on the chronological order of events.
And when you were getting this information about the chronological order of events, that was within earshot of Brian Albert and Nicole Albert?
Yes.
So when you interviewed Brian Albert, Nicole and Jennifer McCabe were listening, correct?
Yes.
When you interviewed Nicole Albert, Brian Albert and Jennifer McCabe were listening?
Yes.
And when you got this chronological layout of the night before from Jennifer McCabe, Brian and Nicole were both listening?
Yes.
So everybody was in earshot, and he didn't record these interviews. The scene was clearly not secured properly, and he didn't find the 40 pieces of plastic or a shoe, etc. when he was there that night looking. It was days later. But then in redirect, I thought this was very interesting and potentially risky for the Commonwealth as well. But they basically just say, why don't you explain to us what happened back in 2002 and just let him ride? And he was able to, I think, do a little bit of damage control here. I'm not sure this was fair for them to be able to get into the specifics of his opinion of it and not be able to impeach him more. Maybe they'll be able to later. I don't know. But he does a pretty decent job of really taming the story of what happened. So let's listen to his explanation. No defense lawyer questions. This is what we're going to end on, is him explaining with his friendly lawyer up there. And I don't mean friendly like there's anything wrong. I mean, it's when the lawyer that calls you as a witness, obviously you're a friendly witness to them, gives you the opportunity to explain this past event that the defense has made you look really bad about. How much of that sting can he take away?
You were asked about from August of 2002. You explain in your own words what happened.
So I had left the establishment, Centerfields is what it was called at the time, and the owner had asked me if I could drive a patron home who had too much to drink, so I obliged. Walked across the street to the parking lot, got in my truck with the patron, and as I was pulling out, that's when Mr. Albert approached my truck and told me how he had been in an altercation earlier in the evening with Mark Lopolato, and that Mark had made threats towards him and his family, that he was going to harm his family. They had a young child at the time. Mr. Albert was concerned and asking me what he should do. Excuse me, as I was...
He said he was going to harm his family, and, he had a young child at the time. It's like there's such a wide range of what that could be, but I think this is a good explanation. Again, I think this is a positive for the Commonwealth to have him explain it in his words and from his perspective about what happened.
Telling him what I think he should do, he said something to the effect of, "Oh no, here they come." And I observed multiple men walking down the sidewalk in our direction. At this point, I got out of my truck, approached the group, and pleaded with them. I said, "Guys, not tonight. He's by himself. He's with his wife, girlfriend. There's not going to be a fight tonight." And I did my best to defuse the situation, but they weren't having it. They made several attempts to push past me. Ultimately, a wrestling match ensued. Mr. Lopolato at one point said, "I know who you are. I don't give a fuck," and asked me what I was going to do about it. A wrestling match ensued. I was punched. And at that point, I defended myself and did engage in a physical altercation with Mark.
Now, you were asked about sort of timing of reports. You didn't write a report until a couple days later, is that correct?
That's correct.
Why was it?
I had spoken to the shift supervisor that night, and I asked him if he wanted me to return and generate a report at that point. And he advised me that I could do it the next time I was at work, which was a couple of days later.
And as far as the police responding to that parking lot that night, how were they notified of them?
I had yelled across the street when the group was trying to push its way past me. I yelled across the street to the bartender and the owner had made their way, excuse me, out onto the sidewalk street area. I yelled across the street and I said, call the police, and they ultimately called 911.
Now, what, if any, relevance or factor did any of that have in your minds in regard to your response and interviews or anything that you did on January 29th, 2022?
Absolutely nothing.
Of course. Had no effect on anything he did in this case.
And in fact, that involved Christopher Albert in 2002, correct?
Yes, it did.
And you were at Brian Albert's residence in 2022, correct?
Correct.
And just to be clear, just because their last name is Albert, they're separate people. You have separate relationships with each of those persons, correct?
Correct.
Now, You grew up in the town, you work in the town, let's say you go to calls.
And, that last line was basically given to them by the judge. She's like, make sure you keep it all separate. They didn't really keep it, that separate, but he wanted to make sure to try to separate it for the jury. I don't think there was recross on this witness. Let me jump ahead real quick. No recross. So that was it on that explanation, which I found very interesting, and I can't wait to hear what you guys all thought about it. Renee, Peter, can we have Papa Tragos on for his thoughts on this case? He's not watching it, so maybe we'll get him on at some point to ask a specific question, but he's not really watching this trial at all. Belinda, Peter, based on all the witnesses set to be called, how long will this trial last? I think they said 4 to 6 weeks, so we still got some time left. Maria, was the judge asked to recuse herself for having a personal relationship with the Alberts? I don't know anything about that. I don't know if she was asked to recuse herself. I don't know if she has a personal relationship. It hasn't come out in this trial, and that's pretty much what I've been focused on. Nina, Peter, how likely / unlikely is a cover-up theory? Have you ever had a case like this or heard of a case like this? So many people involved. I have heard of cases like this. I haven't had one like this. Cover-ups are unlikely, but they do happen. I have heard about things like this happening before. Yes. But this one is, this one's really convoluted. Really, really convoluted. Okay. Peter, what law school did you go to for law school? Florida State University, Harvard of the South. What about your dad? Same. Florida State. We're both double grads from there, undergrad and law school. I've been researching law schools, and I saw one in Florida recommended. Hopefully it was Florida State. Thank you, Azam, for the super sticker. That's all we got for today, folks. Thank you so much for coming to hang out. Hit that like button if you haven't already. Make sure you subscribe. We're continuing to grow subscribers, so we bring people into this case with different backgrounds. A lot of people from Canton and Boston and Massachusetts have come and added their perspective, which I think is great. We got the snow, we got the Boston PD, we got how things work there, how people are there, because every culture and area is a little bit different, so it's cool to have that input. I've loved to see that in the chat, so I appreciate you all. And Lisa and everybody that has gifted memberships throughout today, throughout this live, thank you so much. I appreciate it. If I have time to catch up on the Daybell case, maybe I will do a live or record a video to post tonight so we can talk about that one. But I appreciate you guys so much. Thanks for joining me. Until next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed the episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who may be interested here on YouTube. And don't forget to subscribe. You can also follow us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok. And don't forget to check out the Lawyer You Know podcast with new seasons dropping every quarter. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us at lawyeryouknow@gmail.com. And of course, all these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.